good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Grumman Pilot's YouTube channel. And today we're going to talk about Advisory Circular 43-9C, the latest revelation containing maintenance records. Stay tuned for some more fun. So we would like to ask you please subscribe, hit the like button, and hit the notify to stay current with our content. So Advisory Circular 43-9C covers maintenance records that you have to cover for your aircraft, and it has 19 sections and one appendix. And let's get into the purpose of the advisory circular. So what it basically describes are the methods, procedure, practices that have been determined to be an acceptable means of showing compliance with the general aviation maintenance record requirements and the record keeping requirements of Title 14 of the CFRs, both Parts 43 and Part 91. Now, that's what they have to say about the purpose. In the next two sections, it talks about the cancellation of the previous Rev, which would be Rev 43-9 Bravo, and also what are associated regulations would be all the 14 CFR Parts 1, 43, 91, and 145. And then you get on to Section 4, which is the discussion, and we're going to have some fun with the discussion. It's here in the discussion where they link your airworthy certificate, which you need to fly the aircraft, how it's linked to whether it's still valid. I mean, they talk about it can be surrendered, it can be suspended, revoked, or termination date can be determined by the administrator. And then in further discussion, they go on to talk about how it's tied to the fact that you have insufficient or non-existent aircraft records. Therefore, it becomes invalid. So it ties to your aircraft certificate. So you want to keep your airworthy certificate valid by keeping good, adequate maintenance records for your aircraft. So now we get to have the fun stuff come before us, and we get to talk about the requirements for our maintenance records. So whose responsibility is it? Well, owner-operator, we ought to know that. Maintenance records that are to be retained, we have a record of maintenance for each aircraft, engine, or propeller, the description of the work performed. You need to have the date of the work completion and also the signature and the certificate of the person doing the work. And it doesn't matter what certificate it is, whether it's a private, if you're allowed to do it, whether you're an A&P, airframe, power plant, or whether some other certificate is required. That's what they want to see in the records, the name and the certificate. So in the maintenance record, they also want to have items that are to be part, and they call them out specifically, such as total times are to be kept for like your engine, your airframe, and your propeller. Rebuilt times may not be known to the facility that did the work. You send an engine to Lycoming, they don't know how much time's on the engine. And some were placed in service before there were requirements, and other components such as jet engines are assembled from components, and it doesn't make any sense to put a time on an assembly of components. So those are some other considerations for your maintenance requirements. Also, as part of the maintenance records, you want to keep track of all your life-limited parts. They want to know how much life they have left in them. Time since overhaul for components that require an overhaul. And it also deals with the current maintenance status to be reflected in the records. Are you in airworthy condition? Are you not? Or do you have discrepancies? They also require the status of all ADs to be part of the maintenance record of your aircraft. So you need to have a good AD log for engine, airframe, propeller, and accessories. And now it also requires, as of the date of this issuance, that 337s are now part of your maintenance record and to be carried as part of your maintenance record. Now, the recommendations for preventative maintenance are a lot easier to take account of. First, you must record the preventative maintenance of the aircraft. So it all has to go in there, such as things as oil changes, spark plug cleanings, and it has to be returned to service by an appropriate rated certificate to do it. Now, Section 7 says we have to be correct with our terms. Only an engine manufacturer can zero time an engine, or they can designate someone to zero time an engine, but they're the only ones who can do that. And then you also have to have the date the engine was rebuilt, because calendar time counts towards your engine as well as the hours on it, or the lack of hours on it if you want to talk about the Project Tiger engine. But it also goes on to say that they tend to prohibit the use of the term rebuilt. It doesn't really have a definition in the FAA, and therefore you want to use a more appropriate service term or service letter to describe the work that was done as part of the quote-unquote rebuild. Now, Section 8 is where it gets interesting with recording your tachometer time. They want you to keep a total time of service on all the appropriate components, but you have to delineate how it's done. So if you change tachometers, you don't make the engine a lot younger by doing that. And by the way, in Part B, they even go to say that the owners believe that these can be used as a total time device, which the FAA says, no, they can't. They're just part of the total time addition. Now, Section 9 begins with AD compliance, and they have a lot to say on AD compliance, but they want you to have the ADs for your airframe. They want you to have them for the propeller. They want them for the engine. They want them for all their accessories, such as your starter, your magnetos, your alternator, your ignition switch, your static system, etc., 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 so that should an AD come out, you'll know or not if it's applicable to your particular aircraft. And it will have records to back that up. Now in Section 10, they want to have the required inspections as part of your records. So what did you do to the airplane? Was it a 100-hour? Was it an annual? Was it a progressive inspection? Was the inspection done by the appropriate rated mechanics? And do you have multiple entries for both the 100-hour and the annual? Now in a 100-hour, that can be signed off by a regular A&P. It's not until you get to the annual category that you need an inspection authorization or be an IA to be able to sign off that work. So you've got to have the correct rating on the work that you are signing off as part of the record of the aircraft. Now, discrepancy list, a lot of people say, oh, can you do the annual, and if there are any discrepancies, just give me a list and I'll take care of them. Well, the FAA has something to say about that. They are required. That means that your aircraft, except for the items on the discrepancy list, the aircraft is a airworthy aircraft. And then also, too, copies are not required to be sent to the local physio anymore. If you have a discrepancy list, they just want it to be part of the records of the aircraft. That's where it goes. You don't have to send it anywhere, and it won't be a copy for the owner to throw away and saying, oh, those were never applicable to my aircraft. That's why the FAA wants those lists to be generated by the rated mechanic and bound to the records of the aircraft. Now, I know we've had this discussion before. What value of your aircraft do you have in your records, and how much do you lose if you lose or get the records destroyed? But the FAA covers that. First off, you have to have a current status of all the ADs that are applicable to your airplane, engine, accessories, or propeller, and the life limited parts must have a record, such as when was the last overhaul, last change, last service. So that all becomes part of your service, and that's what you have to replace should you lose or have your records destroyed for your aircraft. And as we get to the end of the document, we run into computerized records. The FAA doesn't have anything to say about them other than it's the owner's operator requirement to have copies of those. Also say that if you buy public aircraft, one owned by a city or a state, then it may not meet the requirements of the FAA, and therefore you should use some caution when buying that aircraft. And finally, Section 15 talks about life-limited parts, and it refers to the retirement time, service life, whatever it's called, that's what they're referring it to, and that the owner and operator of the aircraft is the one who is responsible for retaining the records of all that work. And finally, in Section 16, the FAA begins the discussion on a maintenance release. Repairs and alterations are to be recorded, and usually there's a tag that goes along with it, showing that it's a serviceable component, such as a starter. Some repair stations use to call a maintenance release as a general term for anything that they give up. But you have the maintenance release and the logbook entry that all are part of that part. And now in Section 17, we get to the part of the FAA Form 337. It is to be recorded, and it is to be part of the aircraft record maintenance. And its use is detailed in Accessory Circular 43.9-1. Letters and bulletins detail the work if it's a repair or alteration, and they should also be part of the record. It serves as the basis for why the work was done and how it was, so that your log entry can say work accomplished in accordance with Service Bulletin 195, which will detail all the work, and you don't need a big long couple of pages to describe all the work. And so finally we get to where you have to test and record the inspections for your altimeter. They go into your aircraft records too. You notice they don't say anything about VOR since they're kind of going away. They also cover in section 19 that before you buy an airplane, it's up to you, the buyer, to make sure that the aircraft was maintained with all the appropriate maintenance. And if there are any discrepancies, it's up to the current owner to provide those for your convenience and so you know the safety of the aircraft. And then finally, at the very end, they make a nice AD compliance form for you to use to keep as part of the records of your aircraft. So, ladies and gentlemen, we hope you found all this useful and informative. Take my word for it, this was a very light, high-level read over Accessory Circular 43-9 Charlie. Please read it yourself. I've brushed over a lot of the details to get this down to a decent time. So again, we hope you found all this useful and informative. Thanks for watching, and have a great day flying your Grumman. And in addition, there's a little treat about 3 o'clock in the morning when I'm doing web work and other stuff. Here's my cat coming down, playing with a mouse and meowing and just having a good time with me in the wee hours of the night. So I thought I'd throw this into you as a little treat. Y'all please enjoy.